We Get Outdoors Nation. Some people buy a boat, some people go sailing on a pond, other people talk about going sailing, and some people just buy a boat and sail around the world. And that's exactly what these amazing people today have done. Today we're joined by I think you guys have one of the largest sailing channels on YouTube. And you guys have sailed, I don't know, you'll tell us in a minute, but probably tens of thousands of miles around planet Earth. We're privileged to have Brian and Karin from SV Delos with us. Welcome to the podcast, guys.
Hey, thanks so much. We're actually pretty happy to be here today and talk about a lifestyle we love very much.
Thank you so much.
Can't wait to hear. Now, I've been stalking you on YouTube for longer than you probably would ever imagine, because the secret is that I have an ambition to, when I stop moving house around the world so much, to put all my house into a boat and do what you do with my little family. But how did all this start for you?
Well, I was originally an engineer. I was a software engineer, and I was doing what I thought I was supposed to be doing. I had a job with a big company. I left that job to start my own consulting gig. And then, one day I was riding the bus and I said, why am I not happy with my life? Why am I not content? I have a nice house. I have a car. I have enough money to take, holidays and enjoy a nice meal if I'd like to. And I didn't feel content. And then I really realized that, the bus ride to and from work is the most favorite part of my day. And I had to take a step back and think about why is that, Brian? And it took me a little while, but I finally decided it's because that's the only time that's actually mine anymore. The rest of my day was scheduled into 50-minute chunks with, 10 minutes to get to the next meeting. And then I had hundreds of emails and I had HR issues. And I just said, I could easily do this for the next 30 years of my life, or 40 years or whatever, how long you're supposed to work these days. And then I just said, it's not worth it. And so I sold everything that I owned. I left my business to my partners. I just said, you guys can run it if you like. I'm leaving in 12 months. That's the deal. Put all my money together, sold the house, bought a boat, and headed out from Seattle and made a left turn towards Mexico. I had planned to go for 18 months. That's all the money I had saved up to be able to sail for that long. And then I met Karin in New Zealand.
Yeah.
And that was a little over 10 years ago now.
It's been a crazy journey.
I've never looked back. I'm never going back.
Karin, were you just hanging out in New Zealand looking for a boyfriend, or what was the score?
No, not really. I was actually studying. No. I was actually studying in Australia. So I was doing a 3-year bachelor degree in landscape architecture, and I was on a little mini holiday with 2 of my friends, and we were in New Zealand. We were in this random taco bar, and we met Brian's brother that invited us to a party, and then I met Brian, and then he just asked me do you want to go sailing for the weekend? And we had no plans, so I was like, why not? That's a random thing to do.
And then later she told me that as they are flying from Australia to New Zealand, they looked down and saw the water in the boat and said, hey, I wonder if we could meet some boys that have a sailboat or something. And
so, we could do that. And then, as karma or whatever it is, I don't know.
It's been a long weekend.
Yeah. And I loved it from the get-go. I don't know what it is with the boat. And of course I fell in love with Brian too. And I just love being outdoors so much. You're always moving, you're always kind of depending on the weather and what's going on, and you're so connected to everything outside that it was great. And I did finish my studies, so I did do I was halfway done, so I did do that, but straight away then I went sailing after. So, I love it.
And so you just moved in with Brian and Brady and was like, okay, cool, let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. We were kind of taking whoever, because we were super, super broke. By the time we got to Australia, we were 2.5 years into my 18-month budget. And so we were literally living off of my credit cards, and we were taking random people that we'd meet. We'd say, hey, you can come sail on the boat. you get 3 meals a day, and you get a place to sleep, and you get to travel around on the sailboat, but you got to work as crew, and you got to pay, I think, 15 euros a day is what we were charging people. And that was enough to pay for food, fuel, visa fees, and, little expenses. So that was how we were doing it. We were just kind of like, we turned it into like a backpacking hostel boat. So there was always random people around, whoever we happened to meet. And then, Kaza kind of joined during that crazy time. Which was a lot of fun.
How do you select those people to go into like this sociological experiment of a small object with a bunch of random people bobbing around in the ocean?
It would generally begin with a contest of heavy drinking. And if you could hold your liquor and not be a dick, then you had a pretty good chance of sailing with us. You can kind of tell, from different people are suited to different things. And we're just looking for people who were, low maintenance. This is not a holiday. This is not a luxury charter cruise or anything. Nobody's going to bring you breakfast in bed, or you're going to be up at night. You're going to be doing watches. You're going to be sailing. You're going to be painting. You're going to be cleaning the bottom of the boat. You're going to do everything that we do, and you're going to share in the expenses. And that's kind of, you can weed a lot of people out that way. You're going to sit around and sip martinis. I got news for you.
You just mentioned about sleep deprivation and hard labor, and that turns off half the population of the world instantly.
Exactly. It's a great lifestyle, but don't get me wrong, it's a ton of work. It's a ton of work.
And so we're obviously producing these podcasts, and we're making a few videos. And one of the things that struck me since we've started doing this on top of our day jobs, because We Get Outdoors is our hobby at this point in time. All of this video editing that you guys do, that's a ton of work, eh?
It is.
Yes.
On average, we figure we spend anywhere from 2 to 3 hours per minute of video we release. So, if we put out a 20 or a 25-minute video, then you're looking at, 40 to 60 hours of work. And if you're trying to do that every week, like we do, it's astounding. And so, yes.
How do you balance all that with sailing, with editing, with a child now? We'll come on to your daughter in a while, because I love the fact that you've carried on sailing with a daughter. That's incredible. But how do you balance it all out?
It's been changing over the years. Yeah, like in the beginning, we used to, like when we crossed the South Atlantic, we were, 6 people on board, and almost all of us were editing at the time. So then, we had a big crew, we had, a lot of people editing as we were going. And now I think since it's just me and Brian on board for the last year, and we also have a baby, we've realized a lot of things.
Also a lot of work.
Yeah. The boat is a full-time job. The baby is pretty much a full-time job. And then editing the videos is as well. And, those 40 to 60 hours are just the pure editing part. But then you're filming, you have to create content, you have to do all the social media, all the comments, the scheduling. So it's a lot of things around it too. So we have kind of realized that doing the editing right now, or the big chunk of the editing, is not possible. So we have people that have sailed with us, like Kirill.
Yep, Kirill from South Africa, and Lisa from Austria.
Yep, and Jordan.
Our friend Jordan, who's in Australia. So we've actually, like, over the years, built a pretty solid team. My dad answers all of our Facebook comments. He's in his mid 70s, so he he's not exactly social media savvy, but he has an amazing time doing it. We love the way he interacts with people, and we have just people that help us out, and we make it work.
So how do you? I'm trying to get my words, but I used to be a professional whitewater kayaker. So I've kayaked on every continent apart from Antarctica, and I was pretty well known for falling off large waterfally type things. And
cool.
And that's when I was fit as opposed to fat. It's like a fat person's just a dyslexic fit person. That's what I reckon. They got the I and the A round the wrong way. But one of the things I've always struggled with is the footage that you want to get is normally at the most terrifying time or the most beautiful time when, frankly, you don't want to touch a camera in any way, shape, or form. How do you manage to actually tell the story with and capture the reality? Because like cameras also flatten, like the sea goes flatter when you video it. So you're like, the waves are huge, and you video it and it's like, oh shit, they're tiny. How do you manage all that?
Well, we used to just basically film everything we did.
Everything.
And
like
then,
5 cameras on one flower. Like it was ridiculous for a while because we had so many people on board.
Yeah. And then we'd end up with this gargantuan amount of footage, which would take an extraordinary amount of time to go through and find the best shots. And then over the years, we decided, well, you know, if we're going to continue to do this, we need to work smarter, not harder. And so, you know, we said, well, if we're going to go into the beach, then, you know, we don't need to film going into the beach every day. You know, we're going to go in once, we're going to film what we do. We're going to go for a walk, we're going to film it. But then the rest of the time we're going to take for ourselves. And, you know, maybe we'll bring a camera just in case something super cool happens. But, you know, I think we've gotten smarter about what we film and how we film it. And, you know, for a long time, there's people saying like, well, how come you guys don't have any footage of you sailing in terrible storms? And we're like, well, when we're in a storm on the ocean, the last thing we want to do is pick up a camera. We're just like focused on survival and, you know, controlling the boat. And then, you know, we just started getting better with, you know, the attachments we got for the cameras. We can say, well, we'll just stick a GoPro up, you know, in the corner or an Osmo action camera, and you know, capture it that way. Or I think we've learned what works and what doesn't, and over the years, and then it's allowed us to film some of those moments now. Because if you film everything, the other problem is you end up living your entire life through the lens of the camera, and it changes everything. It changes your perception of where you are. It changes the way that people interact with you. Like if you go through a local market in a country and you have this gigantic camera, like people kind of like look at you, you know, funny. You know, why is that? What are you doing here? What do you want? And so it definitely changes things in that regard. And so, yeah, it's been an evolution.
Does that mean you've, it seems to me, having followed your channel for a while, that you've managed to almost in the past few years regain some of your own personal lives, in some regards, like almost, as you say, storyboard out an episode or what you think you're going to be doing in the next week, and then capture that footage, but buy yourself some breathing time. Is that what you've achieved, or you still got a way to go with that?
Yeah, I think it's always something that we're working on. I think like both me and Brian are quite driven in the work sense. And I think sometimes it might not be in our favor. You know what I mean? Like we tend to, if we get a little gap in like, oh, now we don't have anything to do, we fill it with something. And I think we always have to work on that. It's a constant thing to think about, you know, balance. And if you have some time off, like maybe we shouldn't fill it with something to do, even though we get a lot of really, really nice things to explore and people to meet and like things to film. So I think, it's a balance. Into an oblivion.
But I think the other thing is we don't want the videos, we want them to be realistic, like a realistic reflection of our life. And if we planned what we were going to go film, then to us, we're terrible actors. So we're the worst. So like everything is just randomly what we happen to be doing. And then we decide, okay, is what we're doing right now cool enough to capture or not? And sometimes we film the boring stuff too, because that's part of it. Like on the passage down here, I'm like, well, there's no wind. The boat's on autopilot. Everything's perfectly calm. We're motoring along. What, you know, is this exciting? But that's life. So like, well, what do? I sit at the helm and I listen to podcasts and I eat, you know, biltong, beef jerky. I make a lot of noodles and I stare at the radar. And like, you know, that's my life for the next 3 days. And I guess capturing those little things are, from our perspective, are pretty cool too.
I think also when you work for yourself, we found that, you know, like do what you feel inspired. Like people notice, you know, if you feel inspired doing something, it is going to shine through. Even if you're taking photos or writing something or making videos, just kind of those days when you just feel like bad, I don't want to do anything, I really just want to sit in my comfy pants and watch a movie, then listen to that and be true to yourself. And then when you do feel really inspired, we try to communicate that as much as we can and be like, hey, Brian, I feel super inspired today. Let's go and do this and let's film it.
And that's why we could never be like, people ask, well, why don't you do a daily vlog? And I was like, well, because I think that's probably the number one way to burn yourself out and hate your life, you know?
Yeah.
So
That's tough.
My wife and I are in debates at this point in time. So we're probably going to move to Canada in the next 2 years. That's very heavily on the cards. And cool. People keep saying to me and to us, well, could you share with us like what you get up to? Because 1 minute I'm in the mountains, next minute I'm under the water. Then I'm on a plane somewhere. And people say it's quite exciting. And my wife and I are saying, well, when we're doing this as a couple, as opposed to me just doing it as part of my job, could we do something like you? And then we kind of got to the place where we think we might end up editing videos and filming videos in places where you really should just go and stop and look and be and not get distracted. I haven't come to an answer yet, but it's an interesting thing to consider.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Yeah.
Editing something in the most beautiful place on planet Earth, I kind of think I'd just like to be there and explore it. So,
well, I mean, for a while, we really did struggle with a good work-life balance. We'd be in the middle of this amazing, beautiful place with a gorgeous sunset, and we'd both be down inside while everybody around us anchored, would be out on their deck, like having cocktails, and we'd be down below working. I'm like, Hazza, there's no point in doing this. Like, if all we're going to do is sit downstairs and edit videos and be in front of the computers, like, we should like change the way we work. We should maybe just film on the boat, and then we should go to like a little studio apartment somewhere and edit for a couple of weeks and then go back sailing. And, the last couple of years have just worked on that work-life balance of like trying to figure out a way that we can still enjoy all the time, still produce videos that we're proud of, but yet not miss out on the moments of life that are the reason why you're out here in the first place.
Because you could end up building yourself a floating Seattle, for want of a better word.
Exactly.
If you weren't careful.
Yeah, precisely.
Jeez. So just heading back, there's plenty of people around the world who want to do what you folks do. They want to buy themselves a boat. Maybe they've got the money. And what I'd usually find is people seem to put all sorts of barriers in their way to getting, like, casting the lines off and getting going, and maybe myself included in that, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
How much experience do you need to go and throw the lines off and turn left out of Seattle and head to Mexico?
Well, I mean, in my case, I had very little experience. I mean, I had done some sailing around the lakes of Seattle. I had gone on one ocean crossing voyage from Hawaii to Seattle with a friend that bought a boat. And he was a super experienced sailor. And when I left, there was some guys in my marina that were actually really good sailors. And I said, hey guys, I want to get this boat down the coast to San Francisco. He's like, will you come along on the trip just in case? And yeah, sure. Two experienced guys. And, I learned a lot, made a lot of mistakes after that as well. I just sort of went for it and learned. I guess it also depends on where you're sailing. Like, there's some areas that are super, super treacherous, and there's others that are, a little bit more leisurely to sail in. And so I think there's opportunities for certainly, like, I would not necessarily be a new sailor and just leave South Africa, because those are some of the most wicked seas you'll find anywhere in the world. Mm-hmm. However, like the Caribbean, although it has some hurricane storms, there's a pretty nice season in the Caribbean. The winds are pretty dependable. There's islands, every 20 miles or 100 miles or whatever it is, and you might be able to kind of hop from island to island and figure stuff out. So it's a huge range in there, right?
There is. You can probably, obviously everyone knows I'm originally from the UK, and I've coached sea kayaking a hell of a lot around the UK. And if you go to the Channel Isles in the Atlantic there, just off the UK coast, it's got a tidal range of 12 meters.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Which is
massive currents, I bet.
terrifying. It's that whole thing. You can be sailing in one direction at like 8 knots and still going backwards quite quickly.
Yes.
So I guess location comes into that, in like choose a starting point that's manageable as opposed to something that could be terrifying.
Yeah. And that's one of the cool things that I didn't realize is, for some reason, when I left Seattle, I was just super fixed on the idea of buying a boat up there and then leaving from Seattle, where now looking back on it, it might have made more sense to buy a boat in Mexico. I might have gotten a better deal, and then you're already in Mexico, and then you can kind of live in the tropics and enjoy your time. Because I lived aboard in Seattle for a year, and it was difficult. You know, it's cold, it's snowing, it was windy, the winter sucks, and then the summer's like 3 months long, and that's your window to go. So, yeah.
That is absolutely amazing. So you just mentioned it's windy, it's cold, and it sucks. Well, if we just follow, and I actually own a half of a business in Seattle, so I know Seattle very well. But on the cold theme, you disappeared up north, 80 degrees north a few years ago. The content's just coming out, I see online. How did that adventure go? Why not take Delos? I mean, tell me about it.
Oh man. Well, the adventure was amazing. I mean, we got to sail within, 80 degrees is pretty far up there. It's 600 nautical miles from the North Pole, something like that. It was cold. It was like sailing on another planet. It was beautiful, amazing. It's like nothing else you'll ever experience, I think, anywhere else.
And we were in the Caribbean at the time with Delos, and I think also getting the opportunity to, do something like that on another person's boat sometimes can be quite incredible, because, then we could really focus on like the filming and capturing the experience and stuff, instead of, all the kind of challenges that come with this is, our home, really. And if we would take it up there, it would be quite a lot to deal with beforehand.
So it was cool because, like, as I said, we were able to focus on the filming and the storytelling, and then Andy and Mia were really responsible for running the boat, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. And
this year we actually had plans to take Delos really far north. We did a lot of work on her. We did a little refit in Annapolis on our way up. We put a gigantic heater, a hydronic hot water heating system on board. And then the Canadian border never opened because of this freaking COVID disaster. So, we literally couldn't even leave the US. And so we got to within, 10 miles of the Canadian border.
Yeah.
And had to turn around.
That's sickening.
Yeah. And it's not like it's it's such a long trek to get up there. It's months of planning and preparation to get up there, to get all the windows lined up, and you have a very finite window when the ice melts to get that far up. And we just missed it because we were locked down for so long. But that's how it is sometimes. We still had a great time. We spent a lot of time in New England and in Maine, and saw some incredible things that we otherwise wouldn't have been able to see. And we did get to see plenty of cold weather. So that was not a problem anyway.
Yeah. I think it's interesting to talk a little bit about the Svalbard experience, though, because we filmed that in quite a different way. So, like now the Delos videos comes out, we produce them every week. Whilst when we were up in Svalbard, we wanted to do something a little different in a different format. And we kind of were excited to kind of try more documentary style, I guess. And the production of that was absolutely insane.
Yeah, I mean, it was like something like 2,000 hours of just editing time for that 4-part series. And we had a friend that we met in the Philippines that did all the animations for us, and another friend did the narration, and then Brady and Alex and Kirill did the majority of the editing. So it was quite an endeavor, but we're really happy with how it turned out.
How many terabytes did somebody have to wade through of footage?
Just almost 5 terabytes, something like that.
Oh, my goodness me. That's the very first expedition I ever filmed was in the Himalayas, kayaking in Nepal. And I remember getting home with and this was, by the way, this was like 15 years ago. And there was over a terabyte of stuff 15 years ago. And it took me, like I had to whip the hamster that made the computer run in 2005 to make it go faster, because you just editing that stuff was the world's largest headache. So I can only imagine what you went through.
Yeah. And, our team's all over the world too. So, we managed to do our work environment. I guess for us, being socially isolated is the norm. And so, we have people like Brady and Alex are in California, Kirill's in Indonesia, Lisa's in Austria, Jordan's in Australia. And so we literally work with people all over the world.
Sending footage everywhere.
Using, Zoom and Facebook and WhatsApp and Dropbox. And it's crazy, but it works.
Well, as long as it works. How do you manage the internet when you're floating about?
Well, starting, what was it, last year? I was actually in Southampton at the Southampton Boat Show. And this kind of funny guy, the American guy, comes up and he says, "Hey, I love your channel. I love your live streams, but I think the quality really sucks." And I was like, "Oh, well, thank you." And he's like, "But, I think that we could do something to help you." And he goes on to tell me about he works for this company called Viasat. And they put internet on like all the planes, so on like SAS and JetBlue and American and all these flights, and that was their thing. And he said, we're creating this maritime market where we want to utilize the satellite and the service on boats. And would you be interested in seeing if one of our systems would work on your boat? And I was like, heck yeah. And so he set us up with a gigantic dome on the back. It looks a little funny because it's really meant for like a gigantic ship, like a super tanker or a super yacht or something. But it gives us, like 100 megabits per second internet, pretty much anywhere we are, even in the middle of the ocean. And so that's been a real game changer for us, like super game changer. Yeah.
So does that take out the need for Iridium and stuff like that? Or is it, you still need that as well? Or?
We only keep the Iridium as a backup. The Iridium is like, it'd be the equivalent of like a 2.4 kilobit per second dial-up modem from like the 80s, and this would be modern technology. So it's not even the same planet, really.
Geez, there's a second interview this week where somebody's mentioned dial-up internet, and I thought I'd forgotten that painful experience for decades ago.
You can send text messages, but to upload like a very small compressed like 70 kilobit image might take you 20 or 30 minutes or something on the Iridium. Whereas, on the satellite, we can act like we're plugged into, broadband, right? It's like having fiber on the boat, but we're in the middle of the ocean.
That's incredible. Now, a few years ago, my daughter was about a year old and I had to go do some work in Seattle. So I took my wife and daughter over and we went on a canoe trip. And as being somebody who's kind of into canoeing and quite good at it at one point in time, I thought, this will be a breeze. And I put my daughter in a life jacket in the middle of the canoe, and she could just about stand up by then. So she was stood up in the middle of the canoe and she waved her hands in the water. And next thing you know, she fell into the blinking water. Now, luckily, I was in the back of the canoe. So as the canoe moved forwards, I could just grab the back of her life jacket and pull her out and dump her in front of me. Where I'm going with this. I'm not going to ask you about near misses with Sierra because social services might want to talk to you. But what have you had to do to change your lifestyle and the boat and what you do and where you go to like absorb a baby being on board?
Yeah,
I think just running, I think a lot of things have changed, and I would say a lot of things have changed definitely for the better. Having a child in our lives is absolutely amazing, and we see things in a different way, and it's a lot of laughter going on, and she's so entertaining. But it's also I think every parent can relate to is also extremely challenging. And I think adding living on a boat on top of that is even more challenging. And I think a lot of things, I mean, just running a full-time business and having a child in a very small space, it's not like Brian can, like go into a different room and it will be like quiet and he can work, like she's everywhere all the time.
Yeah.
And unless she's sleeping like she's now, one of us have to take care of her all the time.
Which means when we're on the move, I'm a single sailor.
Yeah.
And Karin's like a single parent when we're sailing now, which is a lot of work.
It's changed a lot. The sailing, I would say, have changed the
most.
most.
I mean, we've changed the way we used to do very long offshore trips. And now we found that's quite hard with her at her age, because she wants to walk around and explore, and a giant wave hits the boat, and she's not that good of a walker yet. So, but I guess as far as changes to the boat, the first thing we did is we bought a safe. Like, we wanted her to have a safe place on board, that if things really went south and we needed all hands on deck, then we could put her there. We would know she might not be happy, she might cry, but she'd be safe. And so we built her like a little, it's like a little tent inside the boat that's tied in. And we can kind of put her in there. She has her blanket. She has a few toys. We can zip it up. That's where she normally sleeps and takes her nap. So she's comfortable in there. And we know that under all circumstances, we can always put her in there. We can do whatever we need to do and she'll be okay. We also, imagine like if you have a swimming pool in your backyard and you have a child, you would put a baby gate or a fence around the pool to protect them. Well, our house is actually in the middle of the swimming pool. And so we fenced our house in. We have these big stainless steel rails that go around the boat that help us work on deck. They're about 3 feet, 4 feet high, just over a meter. And they sell netting. So we took netting and we basically netted the entire deck of the boat in. So now it's nice because it's much taller than her. She can't climb it, and she can walk on the deck and lean against it without fear of her going over. And then we also have the life jacket. So anytime we leave Delos, when we go into our small boat or the dinghy, she's always got her life jacket on, no matter if it's calm conditions or rough conditions. It's just a rule that we always do.
So from one parent to another, I do have a swimming pool in my back garden, and I do have a fence with a gate, and the gate's got three little locks on it, and I'm just going to forewarn you that the worst is yet to come, because when they get to about 3.5, okay. my daughter can now, and it's those locks that like you have to, even for me as an adult, I have to like kick one lock with my left foot while I'm doing 2 other locks with like my right and left hand, like the closures, to get it open. And I have no idea, because I haven't seen how she does it, but the little rascal can undo that gate now and get to the pool. And so now it's like padlock territory. That's like the next stage.
Yeah, that's a whole, we're not there yet.
I think you just have to, like every boat is different and every child is different. And then it also depends on a lot where you are, like when we were up in Maine, she's wearing, 3 layers of clothes plus the life vest. Like it's way more complicated, everything, right? But here in the Florida, where we are now, it's, it's a lot easier because she just pulls on a t-shirt and a pair of pants and then we're outside,
Yeah.
And she also isn't that tall yet. She's not, she can figure some stuff out. But I think at that point, when they get to that age, unless they're inside with the door closed, they have to have a life vest on all the time. And you just have to,
I mean, when we go out on deck, when we're in the middle of the ocean, we have a harness and we strap ourselves, right? So maybe we'll get a small baby harness.
Yeah, we have one. I have one.
There you go.
Yeah.
Karin's ahead of the game, look.
She's the planner. I'm more of like, it'll work out. Let's just do it. But the Swede and Karin comes out and then she plans things better than me. She's very Swedish.
I do find that with kids, you just there's a fine line between looking too stern and disciplining them because they've done something that they weren't aware they shouldn't do, but actually they've already done it. And there's like, you've got to tread this fine path of encouraging them to explore and be adventurous and do new things and all that stuff. and also be aware that that exploring and encouragement that you give them can take them to little mini predicaments on occasions. And it's a really, really weird balancing act.
Absolutely. Yeah, she's just learned to climb up on the table and climb up onto like our galley, our kitchen area. And normally I put knives up there, and there's a lot of stuff that she shouldn't get to out there. And now like we have to change the way, because there's nothing safe inside anymore. She climbs everywhere. So yeah, we're learning as we go.
Yeah.
That's super cool. So I've got a burning question for you. This is completely selfish and about me. So, but I always like to know, when's been the moment in your sailing career where you thought, oh crap, this could go horribly wrong?
Oh man,
there's been too many.
Well, the one that first comes to my mind was we had sailed from across the Indian Ocean, from basically Thailand down to Australia, and then across to Chagos, and then to Madagascar, and then to around Cape Town in South Africa. And we loved that Madagascar so much. One day over, we were eating like Thai food at lunch, and we said, well, let's go back. And, which means that we now had to sail west to east around the Cape of Good Hope, which is one of the nastiest bits of water in the world, going the wrong way against the current, against the winds. And we were on about day 6 or 7 of what was supposed to be like an 18-day trip. We were just trying to get to Mauritius. And we ended up seeing this big low, like the low weather systems. They come off the tip of South America. They hit the Cape of Good Hope, and they come right around, and they just nail you. And we saw one coming a few days in advance, and we had to make a key call as to whether we would sail north or south. And the natural impulse was to sail north, where we're getting into warmer waters and stuff like that in the southern hemisphere. But we figured if we sailed south, we could perhaps miss the worst of the storm, and maybe we'd see like 40 or 50 knot winds instead of 70 or 80 knots, and that's a huge difference. And we did that. It was a very tough sail. It was some of the worst weather we'd seen in all of our sailing for about 2 or 3 days. And
we had 3 crew.
We had 3 crew that were new. They had never done ocean passage before. I just kept wondering, like, what the hell are we doing out here? Like, this is miserable. Like, we can't even eat. It's hard to sleep.
You can't go to the toilet. I don't think anybody went to the toilet. I mean,
a small boat in those seas. I mean, you're talking like, it's force 9 conditions, which means 10 to 13 meter waves, which 30 plus foot waves. It's not nice. But then it's over, and then you're like, oh, we did it. Yeah.
Did you tell the 3 new crew that this is what sailing's always like, and they should just get used to it? Or
yeah, this is it. Doesn't get any better than this, guys. Buckle up and smile. Yeah.
So how do you manage manage all of that conditions? Because I guess the art is to find enough wind to sail pleasantly without having it become terrifying. How do you manage all that?
Well, I mean, over the years, we've learned how to set the boat up for those conditions. So I know for, let's say up to 20 knots of wind, we can set, full foresail or jib out, full mainsail, full mizzen. But when it starts blowing, 50 knots, then we're down to like a scrap of sail, just a tiny little handkerchief, really. And we just kind of go into hunker down mode, batten down the hatches. That's where the term comes from, right? Batten down the hatches. And if bad weather is coming, you try and cook some food in advance so that you can still eat, because you're not going to want to cook in those conditions. And you just listen to a lot of music and podcasts. And
sailing has changed quite a lot as well now with Sierra. We really try to not be out in those conditions, or maybe do shorter sails. But we got nailed coming, like the US coast is gnarly too.
Yeah, we've had very bad weather the last month.
Yeah, it was tough.
You sound a little South African there. Yo.
Hey, you come back and you'll fit back in again, no problem at all. My experience of the East Coast of the US is either it's beautiful, calm, placid, and nothing's happening, or it gets scary quite quickly. That's my only experience I've ever had.
Yeah, I mean, it's the lows are rolling through on a daily basis, and so when we were trying to get down south, we really had to wait for a big low pressure system to go through, and then we basically ride the back of that low for as long as we can. And sometimes even on the back of those lows, you're still seeing 35, 40 knots, which is a pretty substantial. I mean, that's like in miles per hour, it's like 50 plus mile an hour winds, which is not great. And so then towards the end, like the last couple of weeks, we were like, you know what, let's just sit in the anchorage, because we got beat up so many times. We'll just sit in the anchorage. We'll wait until there's absolutely no wind, and then we'll just motor. And we did that like the last 2 trips from South Carolina to where we are now. And yeah, it preserved our sanity. So,
I bet it did,
especially with a baby.
Yeah.
And how do you manage that? So you said when you're sailing now, obviously, or not obviously, but you had your brother Brady and his girlfriend Blue with you for quite a long time. They've gone off doing their own thing in California, from what I can work out. So you said that now that you have a solo parent and a solo sailor. Brian, like if you're on watch 24/7, how do you manage sleeping for 3 days, or actually being useful at the end of 3 days? Or
well, I don't know how useful I ever am, but what we do, that the last couple trips that have worked quite well, is I'll do the watch. If I get super tired, I can take little cat naps for a few minutes at a time, and then I can as we're running radar, and we have AIS, which is like a target identification system. It's almost like a transponder for airplanes, but for boats. There's an alarm for that. And I set those alarms. That helps a lot. And then Karin does watch from basically midnight to 4 a.m. And then I do watch from 4 a.m. to midnight. So I do like 20 hours on. I sleep for 4 hours, and that seems to be working pretty good for us right now.
And then because Sierra sleeps for 12 hours now, and she's 17 months, and so I get to sleep from 8 to 12. Then I'm on from 12 to 4, and then I sleep from 4 to 8.
Yeah,
basically.
And you get to catch up in her daytime sleeps then, just to get a little cat nap in or something, or are you hardcore?
Yeah, it depends on the conditions, and if we need to cook food and stuff too, because like if it's rough and I need to take care of her, it's very little time. Like I basically have to follow her around all the time, because she can just fly across the boat, right? So either I'm holding her, then it's also very hard for me to walk around, or I'm just following her every step. So it's, then cooking and stuff like that gets a little harder too. So yeah, a little balance.
I honestly can't imagine how you ever could cook if she's wandering around and the boat's potentially rolling from side to side, and I can't see. I guess
we have a little boom boat there that works magic. We can strap her into her chair in the galley, and we can throw some sausages at her and keep her occupied for a little while, and as you do.
So there's plenty of people out there who want to do what you do and are looking to buy a boat. You obviously chose Delos for some reasons. I'm guessing, having sailed all the way around the world, I don't know how, once fully, but probably in terms of miles, several times now. I'm guessing there's some things about Delos that you love now, and there's some things that you're like, if only I'd known that 10 years ago. What are those lessons that you've learned about choosing a boat to have as a floating home and take around the world with you?
Well, let's see. I guess first off, it has been a little over 70,000 nautical miles so far, and that's I think it's 25,000 around if you go around at the equator, something like that. So it has been, and it's been every continent except Antarctica. And I don't even know how many countries anymore. A lot. So it's been a great trip. We've learned a lot. I mean, the boat sails beautifully. She's not the fastest boat in the world. She's not the slowest boat in the world, but she's a pretty comfortable boat. She's not a race boat, but she's not like a light kind of coastal cruiser, lake cruising boat. She's meant specifically for crossing oceans. So when you get her set up on the ocean and the sails trim properly, she kind of drives like a bus or a freight train. You know, she's not very nimble, but she likes to just go through waves and just go at a good speed. And so, you know, as far as the sailing complaints, I think she's an incredible design. Some of the other complaints that I never really thought about is just how important ventilation is. You know, like, of course, the more ventilation you have on the boat, when you're at anchor somewhere hot, it lets in more breeze, it keeps it cooler. But then when you're at sea, now you have bigger hatches, you have more holes in the boat, you have, you know, potential for water to get inside, which you always try and keep the wet side down and, you know, the shiny side up, and the water on the outside of the boat is the general rules. Anything you can think of?
I don't know. I think we get that question a lot. Like, what boat is the good one? You know, like, what boat should I buy? And I think it has a lot to do with what you're planning to do.
Yeah,
you know, it's not
true.
like Delos is the best boat for every condition, like this kind.
It's
know?
like, I mean, imagine in a car, if you wanted to go race in the desert for like the Baja 1000, like a Porsche would be a very poor choice. But if you want to do like a super fun road trip, then an off-road dune buggy might be, you know, a very poor choice for like driving hundreds of miles on a highway. So, you know, it's like very specific kind of, and we kind of cross oceans, and so that's why it's a good boat. But I mean, there's plenty of boats that are suited for island hopping and sailing in the tropics. And
so I think more look into like, what do you want to do? You know, a lot of people ask us to like, you know, are catamarans better than monohulls? And same there. Like, it depends on, like, are you gonna, you know, island hop in the Caribbean? A catamaran might be the absolute best option for you, you know. But,
or if you're sticking to the trade winds, or the wind's always behind you.
Yeah, but if you're on a really tight budget, you know, you're also, and you want to stay in the marinas, well, the catamaran might be really expensive compared to monohull. So it's it's a very hard question. You kind of have to talk to the person first to know a little bit more about what they plan to do.
I mean, the other thing to think about is like, people always want to try and get the biggest boat they possibly can. And I was guilty of this as well. It's like, well, I live in a 3-bedroom house. I have a lot of stuff. I must need a pretty big boat. And, you know, when a boat increases like 1 foot in length, you have to imagine that the volume inside of it increases cubically, right? So the boat grows lengthwise, but it also grows widthwise, and it also grows heightwise. And so the difference between like, you know, a 42-foot boat and a 53-foot boat is incredible in terms of space and weight, which also means that maintenance and upkeep and systems are also that much more complicated, because, you know, figure like when you have to paint the boat, now you need, you know, 3 times as much bottom paint, not just a little bit more. And you know, the same thing goes for the rigging. Instead of, you know, 8 mil strand, now you need 10 or 12 mil strand, which is like a lot more expensive. And there's all sorts of factors, you know.
So maybe get some more experience than you had before people set off and go and test drive or test sail a whole bucket load of boats.
Yeah, just like I bet they might. I mean, depending on where you live, maybe you have a cool sailing club like close by. You know, get into the you know, scene of sailing. Maybe dinghy sail first to, you know, learn the basics, get out on the water more. If you have a friend, maybe try to crew. Just to get an idea of like, what do I like? You know, is a center cockpit better? Do I want own cabin? Do I want more storage or less storage? Like, it's so many things. So just getting a little bit of experience, I think, could be very cool.
That's a pretty good point. Like, you know, a lot of the more modern designs that are meant for more coastal sailing, they have these incredible living spaces. You know, they've really maximized the internal volume of the boat, but there's always a cost to everything. And the cost of that would be storage. And so, you know, we have a lot of water, we have a lot of fuel, we have a lot of cabinets, we have storage in our bilge. And so, you know, for us to go somewhere for, you know, 3 or 6 months without having to worry about fuel or water or food is not a problem. But then again, our space inside the boat is a little bit smaller. And so it comes back into what your intended purpose is. And, looking back on it, I mean, I'd probably just do the same thing all over again. I've had so much fun. Like, I would just I wouldn't overthink things. I would use common sense. And, but don't think like you need this super fancy, extraordinarily shiny boat to do it, because you just don't. Like, all the boats, they always anchor in the same sand. Everybody can go see the same beach. So I guess the important things that you get out and do it.
The more sophisticated it gets, the more there is to break, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
How much does keeping Delos, by keeping it afloat, I don't know what I'm actually saying, but how much time do you spend like maintaining Delos to keep it fully functioning?
Well, that's kind of a factor of the boat age too. So, when I first bought Delos, she was about 10 years old. And that's, kind of old, but not that old. I noticed when she became 15 and then 20 years old, then a lot of the major systems need replacing. So that's one factor. Like, a 20-year-old boat is going to be a lot cheaper, but the maintenance costs are going to be higher. And I think we found our maintenance costs as a fraction of boat costs. So if you figure like your boat is worth $100,000, I've found that you can spend anywhere from 7 to 10% of the boat value maintaining her and keeping her up, if you do your own work. And if you don't do your own work, then it's going to get more from there. And so if you have $1 million boat,
that's a yearly
yeah
cost.
I would say yeah, because what I did is I took our 10 years of expenses and I averaged them all out, and that's the actual number I came to. I think that presentation is somewhere. I think we live streamed it on YouTube with charts and graphs and like fuel costs and insurance costs and maintenance costs and all this stuff. But 7% of $100,000 is a lot less than 7% of $500,000, right? And so you can imagine, like, if you extend those averages out, that's kind of what the reality is.
Yeah, 7,000 to 40,000 a year is a big chunk of change difference.
Yeah, and if you have somebody do the work, qualified, skilled tradesmen are in the U.S. are $100 an hour. That's kind of like the going rate. And so if you need somebody to come by and troubleshoot your refrigerator, that could very easily be a $300 or $400 bill. Versus now, I have the knowledge to recharge everything and troubleshoot the compressor and the cooling plates and the evaporator, and it's just stuff I've learned over time. So that helps.
Yeah, trial and error is an amazing thing, hey? So there's a trend at the moment on YouTube of sailing channels going for their 2.0 boat. Sailing Ruby Rose is getting a cat. Sailing Le Vagabond is selling their Outremer. Do you have an ambition for Delos 2.0, or are you going to stick with the good old girl for another 10 years?
Well, for me, I kind of want to finish the circumnavigation. I think it's a pretty cool thing to be able to sail around the world and close your lap on the same boats. And so I've often thought about, it would be cool to get another boat, but maybe after we get the first lap done. Also, we 100% own this boat, and she's paid for it, and that's an incredible place to be, is not owing anybody any money. It gives us a lot of flexibility in, what we can do and how much money we need to operate the boat and stuff like that. And, it'd be cool to get something nice and new and flashy, try, a different style of sailing. But, at the end of the day, I went to the Annapolis boat show, not last year, but the year before, and every boat was like $1 million. I was like, that's just, for us, that's just, even if we could afford it, is it a good idea to spend $1 million on an instantly depreciating asset? Like, I don't really know. For us, it's not. So we'll probably end up sailing her for a while. And then we've looked at a lot of production designs, haven't really found any that we liked. I think we'll probably end up building a custom boat at some point in the next couple of years. I think, in fact, we're there's a really cool boat builder in Cape Town that does custom aluminum or aluminium, as you might say, boats. Yeah, and so it would be cool to have like a custom, very expeditionary, robust design that's insulated and that would just allow us to, not a flashy boat, but more like a workhorse type boat. Just take you wherever you want to go and not complain.
I've set myself my heart on a Garcia 52 exploration. It just looks everything that I'd want from a boat to go to anywhere in the world. It just looks like, I don't know. And I've never sailed it, so I can't talk from anything like that. It just looks like everything I'd want.
I think it's like 1.4 million or starting price or something. Have you looked? I think it's around that. Yeah.
It's scary. I say I've set my heart on it. Whether my head will let me have it is a whole different thing. And
yeah,
even if I can raise that much cash, whether my wife will let me spend it is another step in a different direction.
Yeah, exactly. But she's a great sailing boat. We're pretty happy with her. But at some point we'll move on. Just not ready yet. Yeah.
No. Well, I mean, if it works for you and you like it, stick with it and use it. One of the biggest things I've learned, and I've traveled all around the world. I don't know how many homes I've had in the past 26 years, but I reckon it's getting for close to 40 in terms of places where I've lived for 6 months or more, all over the place. A bit of a nomad. I got married and my wife settled me down for a few years, which is probably quite a good thing. But I've lost my train of thought as well. Oh no, I think you just mentioned about owning your boat. Owning it outright. The purpose of a lot of what we all try and do is increase our level of freedom in life. Well, the moment you've got that monthly amount of money that goes out of your bank account to go and pay back the loan on the boat you've just actually given away some freedom at the same time, because you've got to generate that cash on a monthly basis. And I think it might change your decisions for the worse, actually.
Well, when I left, I could not afford this boat to buy it outright. And I had a house and I had a mortgage. And when I sold the house, I had a little bit of money left over. And so I figured, well, if I can get a mortgage on the boat, which you can on a big asset like a big sailboat, you can get a 20-year mortgage in the US. And the payment was about the same as my house. So I was like, well, I'm just effectively trading a house mortgage for a boat mortgage. And that's what I did. And if I didn't do that, I would have had to wait another 10 years to go on the trip or something, right? It took that long to pay it off. Luckily, we were able to do that. And so I don't know. I guess it's always like, there's never any one answer.
Do you think, so you guys were some of the earliest sort of sailing adopters on YouTube to start having regular content on a consistent basis and turn that into a business? Do you think there's still the opportunity for people to do that now, starting from zero? And do you reckon it's as hard or harder or easier than when you started?
Well,
I think it's different, like I remember when we started, it was only a few other channels, it was very early and we didn't have to play the YouTube game as much, like we didn't think so much about thumbnails. We named our videos the most ridiculous things like diving mecca of the coral universe. Like nobody knows what that is, it was more like internal jokes and stuff. So I think that has definitely changed a lot. Like now to have your videos show, you kind of have to go a little bit into the route of, choosing the right thumbnails because it's so
I can tell you the formula. You got to have bright colors, a face close by, girl in a bikini, and some sort of tragedy. Like something bad has to happen or somebody has to be crying or some storm at sea or some incident of some kind.
Yeah.
And that's what everybody does. And
it's silly, but at the same time, like, I don't know, you kind of fall into we've fallen into the same thing. And we find that, you can do all the calculations and you put another thumbnail up there of, something different. And like Brian standing somewhere and you can just see, like, it just doesn't do as good. So then you're like, well, maybe we should just play the game, you know?
We kind of play it, but not really. Like we're somewhere, like at least we have.
We're fighting it.
Because we at least we have a good sized audience, and they like our videos enough to watch them, whether it has a boring thumbnail and title or not. And sure, we'll get less views on those, but we like the videos, and we've always kind of made them for ourselves anyway, really. And so
I think like regardless, like because we do meet a lot of people also that ask us about the advice and like what can I do and how can I, you know, become a success, because there's also a lot of people out there that do really, really amazing videos and they just don't get the views, and they just like, I'm putting in so much hours and it's just not paying off. But I also think it's important to think about, we started so early and we made videos for 3 years before it even started, you know, making money.
Yeah.
So like we still, even though it was that early in the game, and I think now it is harder because it's so many more channels out there.
I think there's hundreds, if not thousands.
So of course it's going to be, people aren't going to find your stuff as easily. So it's definitely hard. But I think if you're doing it for the right reasons, because you love it, not maybe just because you want to make money from it, hopefully that is enough to shine through. And you have to play the game as well, all right? I mean, you do to some extent. Especially
for starting out.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's been noticeable that the thumbnails of, in fact, Karin, maybe you were one of the girls, girls with just their bikini bottoms on, facing away, but topless. There was a thumbnail of that. I think you got quite a lot of views for that a few years ago. Maybe that was Mauritius somewhere or something.
Yeah.
And now we get thumbnails of, I think the one I saw last week was like just driving in the dinghy with the three of you and Sierra or something like that. And two of you and Sierra. And I guess you're privileged with a large audience to not have to always play the game anymore, or not have to sell that lifestyle type thing anymore. You can do what you please and you've got a bit more freedom.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And we still need to do something that we feel right about. You know, like I'll never forget the first time that we were on passage and we were sailing a long time ago, like one of our first videos from Australia to, where was it? We were going to Fiji. And our friend Nina, we were going to Indonesia. And our friend Nina was on board. And, like, she just happened to be topless on the back of the boat, like washing, like bathing. And then my brother Brady was like sitting there just eating an orange, like not even paying attention to her. And I was like, well, this is so hilarious because I'm looking back and Brady's eating an orange, not even paying attention to our topless friend behind him. I was like, that's a great thumbnail. And so like, I was just like, that'll be funny. And I took it and I blurred her out and then it started getting like hundreds of thousands of views. And I was like, that's all you have to do is blurt out girl in bikini on the boat and people will just watch. And I was like,
we've even blurred guys out though, and it works.
We blurred out Brady one time and that one got views
he
too.
Goes so good. I was like, well, it just
anything
doesn't make any sense right now.
We definitely do less of that.
Come from
like we're sailing around with our daughter, right? So it's way different.
That's it. That's so true. I did an interview before Christmas with the TV show Naked and Afraid. I don't know whether you probably don't watch much TV.
Yeah.
And so I had one of the Naked and Afraid contestants, a girl called Sarah. Actually, she lives in Washington State, actually. And we only had a headshot for the thumbnail, but with the keywords, obviously, hashtag or a keyword of naked, a keyword of afraid, a keyword of naked and afraid. And then I started like diving into where all the view, and we got really, really short view time. Like some of the view time was sort of 20 seconds. Like that was like the average. And I'm like, what on earth? Because the numbers are sky high, but the view time's nothing. And then I started looking at the most, where most of the views, and it got put in playlists and whatever else. And you start investigating the playlists. And you find out that the playlists it's been included in, other people's playlists, are mostly full of half-naked Korean females and whatever else. And actually people were just seeing the title in the image and going, naked female, I'll watch that for 20 seconds. And they
it's an excellent point you make, because there's views, but then there's quality views. And, for a quality view, you want somebody to watch usually, 60% or more of your video. And if you're getting view durations in the seconds or the minutes, then that means that you've gotten somebody to watch, but you haven't captivated them. And YouTube actually sees that, right? They see that, well, this is interesting to some people, but people don't really watch this video for some reason or another. And so I'm likely to not recommend it as much. And so there was a period of time where, YouTube really started paying attention to view duration as an indicator of quality. And if your videos were going out to the right kind of demographic and people. And so we made a decision. It was probably about 5 years ago now, that we were not going to do that sort of stuff anymore, and that we would just focus on getting as many of the right types of people to watch the videos as we could. And I think that really made a huge difference in our project. Less views, but they were quality views, It
makes a huge difference. In everything you do in business, actually, quality over quantity normally wins eventually. Yeah. So you're currently in the south of the United States. What's next for Brian, Karin, Sierra, and SV Delos? Where are you off to? What's the plan?
Wow, I don't know.
We've been discussing it a lot. I feel like it's changing like every day.
We're in the middle of the worst part of the pandemic, and like a bunch of states that are like having breaking virus records on a daily basis. And I don't know, a lot of countries are still closed.
So, I don't know.
I don't really know. Bahamas is still open. Mexico's open. I mean, I would love to go down to Central America, but Belize is closed. Honduras is closed. So it's pretty, I don't know, it's pretty rough right now. Actually, we're sort of just hanging out in a holding pattern.
We'll see, but we will head somewhere. Like
we'll
maybe
go
over to the Bahamas for a little bit, or down to, like we've been discussing, like the Keys.
Florida Keys look nice.
Dry Tortugas looks super cool. Mexico might be an option. There's some options, but it's definitely not. We don't really have a set plan.
It's not as easy as it was in previous seasons, where you can just be like, okay, we always sailed by the weather. We need to watch for hurricanes and storms, and we like to sail in favorable winds. So we look at the, prevailing conditions, and we set our course based on the seasons. But now we have to do that, plus avoid coronavirus restrictions and lockdowns, which is becoming more and more tough.
You're mentioning a lot of like third world countries heading south there, not of the Bahamas, but Honduras and Mexico and whatever. Living in South Africa, one of the things I've become very aware of with COVID is that somebody said, there isn't very much COVID in Mozambique. And I'm like, how much testing are they doing?
They're not doing any testing.
And they're not doing any testing. And I'm like, well, they're not testing dead people. There's just more dead people. So they don't know what the dead people died of. And so I'm like, we don't really know. So it's quite hard to make those educated decisions. In the US, you can pick a state or a place that it seems to be pretty chilled. And based upon a high volume of testing, you can go, it'll be safer to be in Maine than it will be to be in South Carolina or whatever it may well be.
Maine was a great place to be. And that's one of the reasons why we were so excited to be there for the summers, because it's a big state. It has a low population density, and the entire northeast of the US, after what happened in New York, they took it very seriously, super seriously. I think way more serious than some of the southern states, as far as like, closing restaurants, enforcing masks, not only in enclosed spaces, but if you're outside on the docks, please wear a mask, and just doing that. And it's made a big difference for them. It's a little bit different.
But being on the boat, I feel that we're very in control of our own safety. We can isolate very easily and, we're doing Instacart quite a lot, where we just order food and, I'm not 100% sure, but I think if you're wearing a mask and you're outside, your risks are way less to get infected. So, if we don't hang out with anybody, and we just go and get our food and then come back to the boat and just stay by ourselves, on the beach or something. And we can control it quite easily. So that's been nice.
The bummer is that the social aspect of sailing is huge. It's so amazing to sail into a new place. You take the dinghy in and you go into a bar or a yacht club and you meet people and you have a couple beers and you share stories, and you get invited over to other people's boats. When you arrive into an anchorage, or you invite people over to yours and you have sundown cocktails and stuff like that's, you just can't do that anymore unless you really know where everybody else has been, and trust that they've been safe as well. And yes, it's a whole different style of sailing now. It's much less social. Like everywhere,
need to
right?
find 10 or 12 boats and a bay and just go and everybody self-isolate for 2 weeks. And if nobody gets it, then we can meet up and have a party. But that's
what we did in the Bahamas. We were with a group of about 7 other boats. We were all there when all this stuff started last March, and we were all locked down together. And we knew that this is the nearest city was a full day sail away, Georgetown. And we were at an uninhabited island. So we just literally hung out for 120 days. Nobody went anywhere. And we were able to act like normal because we were completely isolated from the rest of the world, right? So we had beach bonfires and we shared drinks and we had parties and we did normal stuff while the rest of the world was not able to, which was really nice for us.
Yeah, I said my mum's a widow, and she's currently in the UK on level 5 lockdown, like locked in her own house in a tiny village on her own, unable to leave by law at this point in time.
Yeah.
It's horrific. And I'm not going to get depressed about it, but thank God for FaceTime and Zoom and whatever else, because at least she can actually see people's faces and communicate. 25 years ago, I dread to think how she'd be. Would have been terrifying.
Yeah.
So, Brian, at the start of this, Karin nominated you to have a good old rant about something.
I kind of had a mini rant about YouTube thumbnails. But I guess aside from that, I think there's one thing that we've experienced, and it's happened multiple times to us. And let's say that when was the last time it really, really happened? I'm trying to think back of a specific instance. Oh, it happened in Svalbard. Okay, so here we go. So we were up in Svalbard, and we were on a beach, and we were filming walrus, and we had our telephoto lenses on. The rules in Svalbard are quite specific, and they state that you're not allowed to do anything that could potentially change the behavior of the animals. So if you get close enough to an animal that it turns and looks at you, then you're too close, is basically what the rule means. We were sitting there photographing the animals, and this miniature cruise ship with about 300 passengers rolled up. They got onto the beach, and they came up and immediately told us that we were breaking the rules. And that we weren't allowed to be there, and that we were too close.
There were cameras there, and we were going to get arrested.
Yeah, and they were threatening us that we had to leave. And then, I started thinking like, well, I mean, I've read the rules. I wonder why they're telling us this. And then they start unloading 10 boats full of 20 people each onto the beach. And I guess the crux of my rant is that as you will travel, you will find places where people's commercial interests conflict with like the laws and what should actually be happening. And so basically they had a commercial interest for us not to be there because they were, selling this exclusive cruise. They come up to this island, and here's just a group of people sitting there with their cameras taking photos of the walruses. How did they get here before us? We're paying all this money. We want to be the only ones here. And we've had that happen to us before with diving as well. Like people tell us, you're not allowed to dive here. To dive here, you have to pay for the tour. And I'm like, well, it's the ocean. Like you don't own the ocean. Like you can't tell anybody where they can and cannot dive. And so we run up to that a little bit. We always try and be nice because it is, we're always in somebody else's backyard the way we live. But it does bother me. That's my rant.
I've got a funny story to link into this. I circumnavigated Scotland in the UK in a kayak over about 2 months, about 10 years ago. and lived out of the kayak and paddled around. It was quite a long way. And there was one area on the Scottish coast where I pulled in and camped one night, and I met these locals in a pub. It's the best place to meet locals, obviously. And over a few pints of Scottish beer, they proceeded telling me how it was illegal to kayak the next section of coastline. And I'm like, screw you, it's salt water, you can't tell me what to do, blah, 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 blah. So I the following morning, I ignored them completely, got on the water, and started my kayaking trip up the Isle of Skye, actually on the west coast of Scotland. And I kayaked as far as the tide would let me, and the tides are very fast there. So you easily get 10 to 12 knots going in each direction, whether depending upon whether tide's ebbing or flowing. So at some point in time you can't kayak that fast, so you get off and put your tent up. And as I'm putting my tent up, 8 military personnel, fully armed, arrive at my tent and surround my tent with the guns pointing inwards.
Oh, geez.
And I'm like, oh shit. And the guy in charge, who I later found out was a sergeant, they wanted to arrest me. And I just kayaked into Europe's largest submarine missile testing area without realizing it. And my chart for that part of the coast had got really, really, really badly destroyed. And so the only thing I could find to navigate with was a like an inch to a mile hiking map that's got all of the land on it and blue for the ocean. And I was like, well, I'm never going to be that far away from the coastline. So, the land is never out of sight. So, and I can kayak in 4 inches of water. I don't need any depth. So, the map will be fine until I get to where my next chart starts. And if I'd had a chart, I'd have realized that when there was buoys of a certain color floating around the area, that it meant there was submarines there having a play. And maybe I shouldn't have been there.
Yeah, maybe.
There's definitely an oh crap moment. Anyway, they were gracious enough to let me off and let me carry on kayaking the following morning. And apparently I held up for that year one of the largest submarine missile testing scenario or exercises that they were ever going to have this year. And I held it up for 6 hours the following morning and all of the previous day.
Well, geez, if they can't avoid a kayak, what are they doing out there? I don't understand.
Yeah, it's just nanny state stuff, I mean, they're never going to hit a kayak, but they just put a blanket rule, and they're like, nope, nobody can go there.
Shame. That's another South African one.
Yeah. That's it. If you ever get a chance to go sailing in the UK, I think you'll have an absolute blast. Go give it a go. It gets pretty sporty with navigation on occasions and tidal flow directions, but it's really good fun. It might be a bit cold though. It's definitely sort of Maine autumn winter weather as opposed to the sunnier shorts and t-shirt climate.
Yeah. Well, we got our share of the cold this year. Now we're going to go hang out in the tropics for half the year and see if we get too hot again.
Do it
like that.
Living in South Africa, I have to admit, I miss the snow. That's the hot weather sounds like bliss until you've done a few years of hot weather, and I'm like, do you know what? Some snow would just be nice, just for a few weeks, just to go. Oh,
that change is good, right? I like that's one of the other favorite things about living on the boat is when you get tired of it, you can just move your house, right?
That's
different
it.
Climate.
Yeah, I often say with my current house, if I could pick my current house up and move it somewhere else in the world, the house is fine. I just want to live somewhere else in the world. That would be perfect. So I just want to say thank you to the pair of you as we come towards the end. So many people have these dreams of going off and doing stuff, and so few people turn it into a reality. And the world needs Brian's, Karin's, Sierra's, Brady's, Blues, SV Delos is out there to go and lead the way and say, you can just say, screw it and let's go do it and figure it out on the way and go make it work. And I want to say thank you for that, because honestly, without you folks, there's no way I dream about taking my kids, they're soon to be kids when the next one comes, and wife around the world on a sailing boat. That'll start in a few years' time. but there's no way that I'd have thought about it. So thank you so much for everything you do for us.
Oh, our pleasure. We have a lot of fun doing it. So
cool. Just before we come to an end, if people want to come and check you out, hang out with you, follow you, do anything with you, where do they find you?
Well, it's all just SV Delos, so SVDELOS, and you can search us on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, or just svdelos.com. That's cool. It's pretty easy.
Pretty easzy. Well, the links will be in the description below. And these guys have a tagline of buy us a beer. So when you go, whenever you bump into them somewhere around the world, if you don't go and subscribe to their YouTube channel, just go buy them a beer. Hey, that'll put a smile on their faces.
And juice for Sierra.
Juice for Sierra. I got in so much trouble. My daughter used to pick up my beer glass when she was about Sierra's age and have a good old slug. And then my wife found me one day and that came to an abrupt stop.
Oh, yeah. No, I can identify with that.
Cool. Thank you for your time, folks. Go check out SV Delos on all of those platforms. And Brian and Karin, I look forward to speaking to you when you've completed your circumnavigation back in Seattle one day. And you never know, maybe we could do it in person because I normally spend outside of COVID half the year there. So,
wow, we just might take you up on that. That'd be very cool.
And then I can genuinely buy you a craft ale of some sort in one of Seattle's awesome.
I will hold you to that, good sir.
Do so. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Real pleasure. Thanks for listening, everyone.